It has become a maxim of the left that Thanksgiving has turned into at least an icon of oppression, colonialism, and at worst, a celebration of bloodshed. Just for the sake of citation, I'd like to show you a couple of stories from the last few years from our academic sources in popular culture that support these ideas. The first story, the myths of the Thanksgiving story and the lasting damage they imbue. Here's a quote from the writer. In truth, massacres, disease, and American Indian tribal politics are what shaped the Pilgrim-Indian alliance at the root of the holiday. Here's another story from Time magazine titled, The Thanksgiving Tale We Tell is a Harmful Lie. As a Native American, I found a better way to celebrate the holiday. Happy National Genocide Day. And so what is so wrong about the history of Thanksgiving? Well, if you live in America in 2023, you know that these colonialists were bloodthirsty. They came over and they massacred Indians, and the Indians were peace-loving, and that's really how Thanksgiving started. What's happened in American academics is since about the 1960s, in full force, there's been a revision of the history of what happened in the 1600s. So you're talking about 300 years later, not based upon the writings or the acts of the individuals that were in that time period. The academic intelligentsia has decided they will tell you what exactly happened. Historian Bernard Balin, on his methodology concerning early American history, he says this: his cosmic eye saw deeper. He wanted to capture not just the physical movements, but the interior experiences, the quality of culture, the capacity of their minds, and the patterns of their emotions. So if you'll notice here, it's not the acts or the writings that we derive what happened in history from, but from some large amalgamized theory we look into with a cosmic eye the interior experience of a people. So me, 300 years later, with my knowledge base, can look back and I can infer what they were really feeling or doing or intending based upon their internal experience or based upon my interpretation of that experience. We can't judge the past based upon centuries later inference of individuals' internal experience because we don't know what their internal experience is. The best way that we can judge the past is by the acts and the words of those who lived in the past, what their experience was, and various different experiences from people groups in that time frame. There are two primary sources that reference the autumn of 1621. From the 104 that came over from England that landed in November, that following spring, early winter, there were only 44 pilgrims left. And incredibly, the pilgrims met an Indian named Squanto. So let's read the original language from William Bradford about Squanto. They just got there, they're barely surviving, and this is what it says. Squanto, here's the quote, became a special instrument sent of God for us, for our good. He showed us how to plant corn, where to take fish and produce and other commodities, and was also our pilot to bring us to unknown places for our profit. And he never left us until he died. That's William Bradford's address. That's his diary about Squanto. So they begin this beautiful relationship. They create a peace treaty with the king, the chief, the Indian chief of the region in that summer. And then in the fall, this is specifically what happens. This language is from Edward Winslow, who is the second of the primary sources about that region. So people that were there writing about what happened. This is what he said about the fall in that season. Our harvest began. Our governor sent 4 men on fowling so that we might after a manner rejoice together. And then this is what happened. 90 Indians came from the neighboring tribe and celebrated for 3 days with the pilgrim this bounty, a feast, and wild turkeys and all of this food that Squanto had taught them how to catch and capture, and they had an incredible celebration. And for the history of man, man has done celebration in the fall time, in the autumn time. The argument that Thanksgiving didn't really start with the Pilgrims is like saying that, well, people have always had a celebration at the end of harvest. Well, that's exactly true. But that doesn't mean that this encounter between the Pilgrims, who were Christians, who were trying to create a Christian colony, and these Indians wasn't a beautiful, salvific moment for the Pilgrims and a moment of peace that should be celebrated. The holiday of Thanksgiving was initiated by Abraham Lincoln in 1863. 1863 was the middle of the Civil War, one of the darkest times in the history of our nation. And at that time, and under that guise, Abraham Lincoln said, we have massive pain in our country, we have massive conflict, and yet, oddly, at the same time, we have the blessing of God. We have invention, we have experience, we have the frontier growing, we have all of these incredible things, we have machinery, we have bounty, and we also have conflict. It reminds me quite a lot like the time we're in now, where there's a sense of national conflict between political polarized sides, where there seems to be judgment at times, and also at the same time there's blessing. In that kind of theater, Lincoln made this Thanksgiving address, and this is technically the official start of Thanksgiving. And this is what Lincoln said: "No human counsel hath devised, nor hath any mortal hand worked out these great things. They are the gracious gifts of the Most High God, who, while dealing with us in anger for our sins, has nevertheless remembered mercy." He goes on to say that we are to set apart and observe the last Thursday as a day of thanksgiving and praise to our beneficent Father, whom dwelleth in the heavens. We too must root ourselves in thankfulness, not to the naked cosmic wandering of banging rocks or primordial soup, but to the providence of a good and righteous sustainer, protector, and creator.